Clara May Hollister's fingers clawed at the frozen ground as blood dripped from her temple onto the snow. Her shoulder screamed with a pain so fierce she couldn't breathe. She tried to stand. Failed. Tried again. Collapsed. "Benny," she whispered through cracked lips. "Dear God, who's going to feed Benny?" The 12-year-old boy couldn't walk, couldn't fetch water, couldn't survive alone. And she was dying in her own yard while the whole town of Silver Creek pretended she didn't exist. This is a story of rejection, redemption, and a love nobody expected. If you want to see how Clara's tragedy transforms into triumph, subscribe to our channel and follow her journey to the very end. Drop a comment telling us which city you're watching from so we can see how far Clara's story has traveled. The year was 1882, and Colorado Territory had no mercy for widows. Clara May Hollister had learned that lesson the hard way over the past 6 months. Ever since her husband Samuel died in the mining accident. Ever since her father-in-law followed him to the grave 8 weeks later. The good people of Silver Creek had made one thing abundantly clear. She didn't belong here. She never had. And they were counting the days until she failed. "You ain't from here," they'd whisper when she walked past the general store. "Outsider. Bad luck follows that woman everywhere she goes." Clara had stopped going to town 3 weeks ago. The whispers had turned to cold shoulders. The cold shoulders had turned to outright hostility. When she'd asked Mr. Patterson at the feed store for credit, just until her hens started laying again, he'd looked right through her like she was made of glass. "Can't help you, Mrs. Hollister. Store policy." Store policy. That was a new one. Samuel had run credit there for years when he was alive. But Samuel was dead, and Clara was just the outsider who'd married him and brought nothing but misfortune to the Hollister name. At least, that's what they believed. "Clara?" Benny's voice drifted from inside the cabin, thin and worried. "Clara, you've been up there too long. You okay?" Clara gripped the edge of the roof and tried to steady herself. The December wind cut through her threadbare coat like a knife. She'd been patching the hole above Benny's bed for nearly an hour, her fingers numb and clumsy with the cold. "I'm fine, sweetheart," she called back, hating the way her voice shook. "Almost done." She wasn't fine. The roof needed a man's hands and a man's strength. It needed proper tools, not the rusty hammer and bent nails she'd scrounged from the barn. It needed someone who knew what they were doing. It needed Samuel. But Samuel was 6 feet under, and Clara was all Benny had left. She positioned another wooden shingle over the gap, raised the hammer, and swung. The shingle cracked. Her foot slipped on the icy surface, and suddenly the sky was spinning, and the ground was rushing up to meet her, and Clara was falling. The impact drove every thought from her mind. She hit the frozen earth shoulder first, heard something crack, felt pain explode through her entire left side like wildfire consuming dry brush. Her head struck something hard. The world went white, then red, then gray at the edges. "Clara! Clara!" Benny's screams reached her from very far away. She tried to answer, tried to move. Her shoulder wouldn't obey. Her ribs shrieked with every shallow breath. "Get up," she told herself. "Get up. You have to get up. Benny needs you." She rolled onto her right side, gasping. Blood dripped into her eye from a gash on her forehead. Her left arm hung useless at her side, the shoulder sitting at an angle that looked wrong even through her haze of pain. "Benny," she managed to call. "Stay inside. Stay where you are." "I can't!" His voice cracked with panic. "Clara, I can't walk. I can't help you. I can't—" "I know, sweetheart. I know." Clara gritted her teeth and pushed herself to her knees. The world tilted dangerously. "Just stay calm. I'm coming." She got one foot under her, then the other, stood swaying in the bitter wind, her vision swimming, her shoulders screaming. 20 feet to the cabin door. 20 feet had never seemed so far. Clara took one step, another. The third step made her cry out as something grated in her shoulder, bone against bone in a way that shouldn't happen. She fell again. This time she couldn't get back up. The cold seeped into her body, numbing the pain, numbing everything. Snow began to fall, soft and silent, covering her in a thin white blanket. "Please," Clara whispered, not sure if she was talking to God or to the uncaring sky. "Please, someone help us. Anyone." The only answer was the wind. Inside the cabin, Benny was crying. She could hear him through the thin walls, calling her name over and over, helpless and terrified. 12 years old, with legs that would never carry him again, trapped while the only person left who loved him lay dying in the snow. Clara closed her eyes. She thought about Samuel, about his easy smile, and the way he'd promised to take care of her forever. Forever had lasted 3 years. She thought about the town, about all those righteous faces that had turned away from her in her hour of need. About Judge Ashworth, who held the note on her farm and visited every month with his false sympathy and his standing offer to take this burden off her hands. She thought about Benny, sweet Benny, who read books by candlelight and dreamed of seeing the ocean someday, who called her sister even though they shared no blood, who would end up in some terrible institution if she died here today, alone and forgotten and afraid. "I'm sorry," she thought. "I'm so sorry I wasn't strong enough." The sound of hoofbeats came from somewhere distant, muffled by the falling snow. Clara barely registered them. A hallucination, probably. No one rode out to the Hollister place anymore. No one cared enough to check on the cursed widow and her crippled charge. The hoofbeats grew louder, stopped. "Good Lord!" The voice was deep, rough with concern. A man's voice, unfamiliar. Clara forced her eyes open. Through the curtain of snow and blood, she saw a figure dismounting from a tall horse. Broad shoulders, dark hat pulled low, moving toward her with purpose. "Don't," she managed to croak. "Don't touch me." The stranger ignored her. He knelt beside her, and she caught a glimpse of weathered features, a strong jaw rough with stubble, eyes the color of dark coffee that held none of the contempt she'd grown accustomed to seeing. "Ma'am, I ain't gonna hurt you." His hands were surprisingly gentle as they assessed her injuries. "But you're in a bad way. That shoulder's dislocated, and you're bleeding from your head. How long you been lying out here?" "Don't know." Clara's teeth chattered. "My boy, inside. He can't walk. Please, check on him first." The stranger's eyes flickered toward the cabin, where Benny's cries had faded to whimpers. Something shifted in his expression. "Anyone else here? Husband? Farmhand?" Clara laughed, though it came out as more of a sob. "You're looking at the entire Hollister operation, mister. Just me and a 12-year-old with broken legs." The stranger was quiet for a moment. Then he shrugged off his heavy coat and draped it over her shivering body. "Name's Elijah Tanner. Folks call me Eli." He scooped her up as easily as if she weighed nothing, cradling her against his chest to avoid jarring her injured shoulder. "Let's get you inside before you freeze to death. Then we'll figure out the rest." "I can't pay you," Clara said, because it seemed important that he knew. "I don't have anything to give you." Eli's arms tightened around her briefly. "Didn't ask for payment, ma'am. Asked for nothing at all." He carried her through the snow toward the cabin, and Clara, exhausted beyond all reason, let her head fall against his shoulder and stopped fighting. Inside, Benny sat in his wheeled chair by the fireplace, his face streaked with tears and his eyes wide with fear. When Eli came through the door with Clara in his arms, The boy let out a strangled cry. "Is she dead? Mister, is she dead?" "She ain't dead," Eli said calmly, laying Clara on the narrow bed in the corner. "She's hurt bad, but she ain't dead. You got any whiskey in this place? Clean cloth?" Benny's hands shook as he pointed. "Cabinet by the stove. There's some of Pa's old medicine whiskey. And Ma, Clara keeps clean rags in the chest by the door." Eli moved efficiently through the small space, gathering supplies. Clara watched him through half-closed eyes, trying to make sense of this stranger who had appeared out of nowhere, like an answer to her desperate prayer. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with the kind of lean, rangy build that spoke of years in the saddle. His clothes were worn but well-maintained. A gun belt hung at his hip, the holster scarred with use. Late 30s, she guessed, though the gray threading through his dark hair and the lines around his eyes might have added years that weren't really there. His hands, she noticed, bore old scars. Burns, maybe. And a long white line ran down his left forearm, visible when he pushed up his sleeves. "This is gonna hurt," he warned, returning to her bedside with the whiskey and cloth. "Your shoulder needs setting, and I ain't gonna lie to you. It's gonna hurt something fierce." Clara swallowed hard. "I've had a baby. I can handle pain." Something flickered in Eli's expression. There and gone, too quick to read. "All right, then." "Boy, you might want to look away." Benny shook his head stubbornly. "I'm staying. Clara stayed when the doctor set my legs. I'm staying." Eli nodded, something like respect crossing his features. "Fair enough. Ma'am, I need you to try and relax. Bite down on this." He placed a folded piece of leather between her teeth. "On 3. 1, 2. He didn't wait for 3. The pain was immediate and absolute. Clara's vision went white. She heard a popping sound, felt her shoulder slot back into place, and then she was falling into darkness. When she woke, the fire had been built up, and warmth had returned to the cabin. Her shoulder throbbed with a deep, persistent ache, but the grinding agony of before had faded. Someone had cleaned the blood from her face and wrapped her ribs with careful precision. "She's awake!" Benny's voice was bright with relief. "Eli, she's awake!" Clara turned her head and found the stranger sitting at their small table, a bowl of something steaming in front of him. He rose immediately and came to her bedside. "How you feeling, ma'am?" "Like I fell off a roof," Clara replied weakly. The corner of Eli's mouth twitched. "Reckon that's accurate. You've got 3 cracked ribs, a dislocated shoulder that's back where it belongs now, and a nasty gash on your head that I stitched up while you were out. You're going to be laid up for a good while." The reality of her situation crashed over Clara like a wave of ice water. Laid up. Unable to work. With animals to feed and a mortgage payment due in 2 weeks, and a child to care for who couldn't care for himself. "I can't," she said, struggling to sit up. "I can't be laid up. The livestock, the—" Eli's hand pressed gently but firmly against her good shoulder, pushing her back down. "The livestock's been fed and watered. Your cow's been milked. Horses have hay. The chickens are confused, but alive." Clara stared at him. "You did all that?" "Wasn't hard. Your boy here told me where everything was." Eli nodded toward Benny, who was beaming with a pride Clara hadn't seen on his face in months. "He's got a good head on his shoulders, that one." "He does," Clara agreed softly. Then, because she couldn't hold it back anymore, "Why are you helping us? Nobody helps us. This whole town would rather watch us starve than lift a finger." Eli was quiet for a long moment. He returned to his chair at the table, his movements slow and deliberate. "Passed through Silver Creek this morning," he said finally. "Asked about work at the saloon. Man there, big fellow with a red beard, told me about the Hollister widow. Said you were cursed. Said anyone who helped you would catch the bad luck too. He paused. Said your boy was crippled because God was punishing you for something. Clara's throat tightened. Hank Morrison, the blacksmith. He never forgave me for marrying Samuel instead of his son. Figured it was something like that. Eli's dark eyes met hers, and Clara saw something in them that made her breath catch. Not pity. Understanding. I don't put much stock in curses, ma'am. And I don't put any stock at all in a God that cripples children to punish their mothers. Benny made a small sound. Clara looked over to find him wiping his eyes with his sleeve, his thin shoulders shaking. Nobody ever said that before, the boy whispered. About me, I mean. That I wasn't punishment. Eli rose from his chair and crossed to Benny, crouching down so they were at eye level. Listen to me, son. What happened to your legs was an accident. Nothing more, nothing less. Doesn't say anything about who you are or who your people are. You understand me? Benny nodded, tears streaming freely now. Yes, sir. Good. Eli straightened up, his voice gruff. Now, I noticed you got a checkerboard over there. You any good? I beat Clara every time, Benny said with a watery smile. That's so. Eli glanced at Clara with a hint of challenge. Well, let's see how you do against someone who actually knows how to play. Clara watched as the stranger settled into the chair across from Benny and began setting up the checkerboard. Something loosened in her chest, something that had been wound tight for so long she'd forgotten it was there. She still didn't know anything about this man, didn't know where he came from or where he was going or what had brought him to their door on the worst day of her life. Didn't know if she could trust him. But Benny was laughing, actually laughing for the first time in months. And Clara found, against all reason and common sense, that she wanted to believe. Eli stayed for dinner. Then he stayed to check her bandages one more time. Then it was dark outside, and the wind was howling, and the snow was falling thick and fast. Storm's getting worse, Benny observed, peering out the window. You can't ride back to town in this, Eli. You'll freeze. Boy's right, Clara said from her bed. She'd managed to prop herself up against the pillows, though every breath still ached. We've got a barn. It's not much, but it's dry, and there's a stove out there for the animals. You're welcome to bunk there for the night. Eli hesitated. Clara could see the war playing out on his face, propriety fighting against practicality. I don't want to impose, ma'am. You saved my life today, Clara said simply. Offering you a dry place to sleep in a blizzard ain't imposing. It's barely adequate thanks. Another long pause. Then Eli nodded. I'm obliged, Mrs. Hollister. I'll be out of your way come morning. Clara, she said, Mrs. Hollister was my mother-in-law, and she never did like me much. Just Clara is fine. Clara, then. Eli gathered his coat and hat. Get some rest. Those ribs won't heal if you keep pushing yourself. After he left, Benny wheeled himself over to Clara's bedside. His young face was thoughtful, his eyes, Samuel's eyes, brown and warm, searching hers. You think he'll really leave in the morning? Clara sighed. Probably. Men like that don't stay in one place long. But what if he did? Benny pressed. What if he stayed? Benny. I know. We can't trust strangers. That's what Pa always said. Benny's hands twisted in his lap. But Pa also said that sometimes God sends help when you least expect it. And Clara, you prayed. I heard you before you passed out. You prayed for someone to help us. Clara's eyes stung. I didn't think anyone was listening. Maybe someone was. Benny reached out and squeezed her hand. Maybe someone was. Clara didn't sleep well that night. The pain kept waking her, and every time she stirred, she found herself listening for sounds from the barn. Was he still there? Had he slipped away in the darkness like smoke? Why did she care so much either way? Dawn came gray and cold, the storm having blown itself out sometime before first light. Clara was struggling to sit up, biting back groans of pain, when the cabin door opened and Eli stepped inside. He carried a pail of fresh milk in one hand and a basket of eggs in the other. His cheeks were reddened from the cold, but his expression was calm. "Morning," he said, setting his burdens on the table. "Your chickens are mean as snakes, you know that? Nearly lost a finger getting these." Clara stared at him. "I thought you were leaving." "Changed my mind." Eli shed his coat and moved to the stove where a kettle sat waiting. "Realized on my way out to the barn last night that I forgot to ask how you were planning to manage once I was gone. With those ribs and that shoulder, you can't work. Can't lift anything heavier than a spoon. Probably can't even dress yourself without help." Heat flooded Clara's face. "I'll manage. I always manage." "Don't doubt it," Eli said about making coffee, his movements sure and practiced. "But managing and surviving ain't the same thing. And what about the boy? He needs more care than you can give right now." Clara opened her mouth to argue, then closed it again. Because he was right. She hated it, but he was right. Benny wheeled himself out of his small room, yawning. His face lit up when he saw Eli at the stove. "You stayed." "Appears so." Eli poured coffee into 3 cups, then seemed to realize what he'd done, and glanced at Clara. "Sorry, habit. Didn't think about the boy being too young for coffee." "Benny drinks coffee," Clara said automatically, still trying to process this turn of events. "Has since he was 10. Samuel always said—" She trailed off. Samuel always said. Samuel used to, Samuel thought. Everything in her life came back to a dead man. "Samuel was your husband?" Eli asked quietly. "Yes." Clara accepted the cup he brought her, wrapping her good hand around its warmth. "He died 8 months ago. Mining accident. And then his father passed 6 months ago. And since then, it's just been me and Benny." Eli settled into a chair, his own cup cradled between his scarred hands. "This town don't seem too friendly toward you." "They're not," Benny spoke up, his voice bitter in a way that made Clara's heart ache. "They never liked Clara because she's from Kansas, not Colorado. And they never liked me because I'm slow." He made air quotes with his fingers. "That's what they call me, slow, because I can't walk." "You ain't slow," Eli said mildly. "You beat me at checkers 4 times last night." Benny ducked his head, but not before Clara saw his pleased smile. "There's also Judge Ashworth," Clara said, deciding if they were laying cards on the table, she might as well show her whole hand. "He holds the note on this farm. And he's been circling like a vulture ever since Samuel died. Wants the land? Wants something. I don't know what exactly. There's nothing special about this 40 acres. No gold or silver that anyone knows of. But he's made it clear he wants us gone." Clara's grip tightened on her cup. "Payment's due in 2 weeks. I've got about half what I need." Eli was quiet, turning this information over. "How much you short?" $15. "That ain't too bad." Clara laughed, and it came out harsh. "Maybe not for some. For me, it might as well be $1,500. I've got nothing left to sell except the animals, and if I sell them, I can't work the land anyway." "What about crops? You got anything coming in?" "Spring wheat, if the weather holds, but that won't help me now." Clara set her cup aside, exhaustion crashing over her in waves. "I appreciate what you've done, Mr. Tanner. Truly. But you don't need to get involved in my mess. This ain't your problem." Eli studied her for a long moment. His face gave nothing away. "Mrs. Hollister, Clara, I spent 8 years drifting from place to place, never staying anywhere longer than a season, running from—" He stopped, shook his head. "Running from ghosts. And I'm tired." "Tired?" "Bone tired. Soul tired." His dark eyes met hers. "When I rode up to your place yesterday and saw you lying in the snow, something told me this was where I was supposed to be. Can't explain it better than that." Clara wanted to believe him, wanted it so badly her chest ached with it. But she'd learned hard lessons about trust. "I don't know anything about you," she said carefully. "You could be anyone. You could be—" "A killer?" Eli's mouth curved in a humorless smile. "I've killed men, Clara. In the war. After it, too, when circumstances required." He held up his scarred hands. "These hands have done things I ain't proud of. But I've never hurt a woman or a child in my life, and I don't intend to start now." The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken questions. "Let me stay," Eli said finally. "Just until you're healed. I'll sleep in the barn, work for my keep. If after that you want me gone, I'll go. No arguments." "Why?" Clara whispered. "Why do you care what happens to us?" Eli's expression shifted, shadows moving behind his eyes. "Because once, a long time ago, someone should have helped and didn't. And I've been carrying that weight ever since." He didn't elaborate. Clara didn't ask. "1 week," she said at last. "We'll see how it goes for 1 week." Eli nodded, something like relief flickering across his features. 1 week. Benny, who had been watching this exchange with the intensity of a hawk, suddenly grinned. "Does this mean you'll play checkers with me again?" Eli's stern face softened. "Reckon it does, son. Reckon it does." Over the next several days, a rhythm established itself in the Hollister cabin. Eli rose before dawn to tend the animals and haul water. By the time Clara managed to dress herself, a painful, slow process that left her sweating and breathless, breakfast was waiting, and Benny was chattering happily about whatever book he'd been reading by candlelight. True to his word, Eli slept in the barn and maintained a respectful distance. But the time they spent together increased gradually, naturally, as Clara's curiosity got the better of her caution. She learned that he was 34 years old, born in Tennessee, but raised in Texas after his family moved west when he was a boy. He'd fought for the Union in the war, an unpopular choice for a Texan, and had served as a field medic, which explained his skill with her injuries. What he didn't tell her, what she sensed lay beneath the surface like a bruise that wouldn't heal, was why he'd spent 8 years wandering. What ghosts he was running from. "You mention you've killed men," she said one evening as they sat by the fire while Benny slept. The words had been building in her for days. In circumstances that required it, what did that mean? Eli stared into the flames, his jaw tight. "Means I've made enemies of bad men. Means I've defended people who couldn't defend themselves. Means I've got blood on my hands that won't wash off no matter how hard I scrub." "But you're not a bad man." "No?" He looked at her then, and Clara saw something raw and wounded in his gaze. "How can you be so sure?" "Because bad men don't stop to help widows in the snow. Bad men don't play checkers with crippled boys and tell them they're not punishment from God." Clara held his gaze steadily. "Bad men don't care if they're bad. You do." Eli was silent for so long that Clara thought she'd pushed too far, said too much. Then he reached into his shirt and pulled out a small locket on a chain. "Her name was Sarah," he said quietly, opening the locket to reveal a tiny painted portrait. A young woman with light hair and kind eyes. "My wife. And this," he pointed to a smaller image, barely visible, "was our daughter, Emma. She was 3 years old." Clara's heart clenched. "Was?" "They're gone. 8 years now." Eli's voice was steady, but his hands trembled. "I was away, working a cattle drive to earn money for the winter. While I was gone, a gang of raiders hit our homestead. Killed Sarah. Killed Emma. Burned everything. Oh, Eli. Clara reached out without thinking, her hand covering his. I'm so sorry. I tracked them for 2 years, Eli continued, as if he hadn't heard her. Found most of them. Made them pay for what they did. His jaw tightened. But the leader, the one who gave the orders, he got away. Vanished like smoke. And you've been searching for him ever since? Eli nodded slowly. Had a lead that brought me this way. Heard he might be holed up somewhere in Colorado territory. His eyes met hers. But when I rode up to your place and saw you lying there, I don't know, something changed. For the first time in 8 years, something mattered more than revenge. The weight of his confession settled over them like a blanket. Clara understood now, the shadows in his eyes, the way he tensed whenever someone approached the cabin, the gun he kept always within reach. He wasn't just a drifter. He was a man on a mission, a dangerous man with dangerous enemies. She should send him away, for her own safety, for Benny's. Instead, she squeezed his hand and said, "Thank you for telling me." Eli looked down at their joined hands, then back up at her face. Something shifted in his expression, something warm and wondering that made Clara's pulse quicken. You're a remarkable woman, Clara Hollister. I'm a tired woman trying to keep her head above water, she corrected. Nothing remarkable about that. There is, Eli said softly. There is. The next morning, Clara woke to the sound of raised voices outside. Male voices, plural, and one of them belonged to Eli. No business here, I said. Eli's tone was cold and hard, nothing like the gentle voice he used with her and Benny. The widow's business is the bank's business. The second voice was oily, self-satisfied. Clara recognized it immediately. Judge Cornelius Ashworth. She struggled out of bed, ignoring the fire in her ribs, and made her way to the window. Outside, Eli stood between the cabin door and 2 mounted men. The first was Ashworth himself, impeccably dressed as always in his Eastern-style suit and polished boots. The second was a younger man Clara didn't recognize, dark-haired and cold-eyed, with the look of hired muscle. Mrs. Hollister isn't receiving visitors, Eli said flatly. You can come back when she's recovered. Recovered from what, exactly? Ashworth dismounted, his smile never reaching his eyes. I heard the poor dear had an accident. Such a shame. A woman alone out here, no one to help her, no one to care if something were to happen. She ain't alone. Eli's hand rested casually on his gun belt. And I care plenty. Ashworth's eyes narrowed as he assessed Eli with new interest. I don't believe we've been introduced. I'm Judge Cornelius Ashworth. I hold the mortgage on this property. Elijah Tanner. I work here. Work here? Ashworth's laugh was thin and unpleasant. Since when can the widow afford hired help? She can barely afford to feed herself. My wages ain't your concern. The 2 men stared at each other, tension crackling between them like lightning before a storm. Clara had seen enough. She grabbed her shawl and opened the cabin door. Judge Ashworth, she called, pleased that her voice came out steady despite the pain. What brings you all the way out here? Ashworth's expression shifted to false concern as he swept off his hat. Mrs. Hollister, I heard about your accident and came to check on you personally. Are you being properly cared for? I'm being cared for just fine. Clara stepped forward to stand beside Eli, acutely aware of how his body shifted slightly, positioning himself to shield her. Was there something else? Just a friendly reminder that your payment is due in 10 days. Ashworth's smile was a knife wrapped in silk. I do hope this unfortunate setback won't affect your ability to meet your obligations. I'll make my payment, Clara said coldly. Same as always. Of course, of course. Ashworth replaced his hat. But do remember, Mrs. Hollister, my offer still stands. Should you find yourself unable to continue, the bank would be happy to take this burden off your hands. For a fair price, naturally. The lady said she'll make her payment. Eli's voice cut through like a blade. Seems to me this conversation is finished. Ashworth's eyes flickered between them, calculating. Then he smiled, a thin, predatory expression that made Clara's skin crawl. Indeed it is. For now. He mounted his horse, then paused. Mr. Tanner, was it? I hope for your sake that your presence here is legitimate. Silver Creek doesn't take kindly to drifters, especially drifters who insert themselves into other people's affairs. I'll keep that in mind, Eli replied flatly. Ashworth tipped his hat to Clara, then rode away, his silent companion following. Only when they were out of sight did Clara let out the breath she'd been holding. You shouldn't have done that, she said, though her voice lacked conviction. Made an enemy of him. Reckon I've made enemies of worse men. Eli turned to face her, his expression softening. You okay? Should you even be standing? I'm fine. Clara swayed slightly, and Eli's hand shot out to steady her. All right, maybe not completely fine. Let's get you back inside. Eli guided her toward the cabin, his touch gentle and warm. And then we need to talk about how you're going to make that payment. I don't know how, Clara admitted, the words tasting like ashes in her mouth. I've gone over the figures 100 times. There's no way. Eli was silent as he helped her back to bed, his face thoughtful. Then he sat down in the chair beside her and leaned forward. There might be a way, he said slowly. How do you feel about wild horses? Clara stared at him, certain she'd misheard. Wild horses? There's a ranch about 5 miles east of here, Eli explained, settling back in his chair. The Bar M. Passed by it on my way into Silver Creek. They've got a corral full of Mustangs, fresh off the range, and a sign posted offering $4 a head for anyone who can break them saddle ready. $4 a head, Clara repeated slowly, doing the math. That's enough to cover what you're short, with some left over for supplies. Eli's dark eyes held hers steadily. I've been breaking horses since I was 14 years old. It's one of the few things I'm good at. But your work here can wait a few days. Your animals are fed, your woods stocked, and the boy can manage the small stuff while I'm gone. Eli leaned forward. Clara, this is a way out. A real one. Hope flickered in Clara's chest, fragile as a candle flame in a windstorm. She wanted to believe it could be this simple. But nothing in her life had been simple for a very long time. Why would you do this? She asked quietly. Risk your neck breaking wild horses for a woman you barely know. Eli was silent for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. Because I know what it's like to lose everything. To have nobody in your corner when the world's trying to crush you. He met her gaze. And because that boy in there deserves better than watching his whole world fall apart again. Clara's throat tightened. She glanced toward Benny's room, where she could hear him turning pages, lost in one of his precious books. He's not my blood, she said softly. Samuel's brother from his father's first marriage. After the accident that took his legs, most folks thought he'd be better off in an institution. Samuel refused, said Benny was family, and family takes care of their own. Smart man, your husband. He was. Clara's voice caught. He was the best man I ever knew. And when he died, I promised I'd take care of Benny no matter what. But I'm failing, Eli. Every day I'm failing a little more. You ain't failing. Eli's hand covered hers, warm and calloused. You're fighting. There's a difference. Clara looked down at their joined hands. His touch sent something warm spreading through her chest, something she hadn't felt in so long she'd almost forgotten what it was. She pulled away gently, not because she wanted to, but because she was afraid of what wanting might lead to. When would you go? Tomorrow morning, if you're agreeable. Sooner I start, sooner I finish. Clara nodded slowly. All right, but Eli, be careful. Wild horses have killed better men than you. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Better men, maybe, but not meaner ones. That night, after Benny had gone to bed, Clara found herself unable to sleep. She sat by the fire, her injured shoulder aching, her mind turning over everything that had happened in the past week. A stranger had ridden into her life and changed everything. Or maybe not everything. Maybe he'd just shown her that change was still possible, even when hope seemed lost. The cabin door opened quietly, and Eli stepped inside. He stopped when he saw her sitting there. Couldn't sleep? Clara shook her head. Too much thinking. Eli crossed to the fire and added another log, then settled into the chair across from her. The flames cast dancing shadows across his weathered face. Can I ask you something? Clara said. You can ask. Don't promise I'll answer. The man who led the raid on your homestead. The one who got away. She hesitated. Do you really think he's somewhere in Colorado? Eli's jaw tightened. Got word from a man I trust. Said he saw someone matching the description working for a wealthy landowner in these parts. Someone with power. Someone who protects him. A chill ran down Clara's spine. What's his name? The man you're looking for. Marcus Blackwood. Eli spoke the name like a curse. Tall, dark hair, got a scar running through his left eyebrow. Cold eyes, like a snake's. His hands clenched into fists. I've been hunting him for 8 years. 8 years of dead ends and false leads. But this time feels different. This time, I'm close. Clara thought of Judge Ashworth and his silent companion that morning. Dark-haired, cold-eyed. She hadn't noticed a scar, but she hadn't been looking either. Eli, she said carefully, the man who was with Judge Ashworth today.
Did you get a good look at him?
Eli's head snapped up. Why? I don't know. Something about the way you described Blackwood. It made me think of him. I didn't pay him much mind, Eli admitted. Was too focused on Ashworth. His eyes narrowed. You think there might be a connection? I don't know what I think, but Ashworth's been circling my land like a vulture for months, and he's got more money and influence than any honest judge should have. Eli was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. If Blackwood is working for Ashworth, if he's been here all this time, right under my nose, then you'd have your answers, Clara finished softly. But Eli, if this man is as dangerous as you say, and if Ashworth is protecting him, then I'd be painting a target on your back just by being here. Eli rose abruptly, pacing to the window. Maybe I should leave. Take this fight somewhere else. Somewhere I can't touch you and the boy. No. The word came out fiercer than Clara intended. She struggled to her feet, ignoring the protest of her ribs. You don't get to do that. You don't get to ride into my life, make me hope again, and then disappear because things got complicated. Eli turned to face her, surprise flickering in his eyes. Clara, I've had enough of people leaving, her voice cracked. Samuel left. His father left. Everyone in this town left the moment they decided I wasn't worth helping. I am so tired of being left behind." "I'm trying to protect you," Eli said roughly. "Then stay and protect me. Don't run." Clara took a step toward him, then another. "Whatever's coming, we face it together. That's what you said, isn't it? That you were tired of running?" The space between them had shrunk to almost nothing. Clara could see the rapid pulse beating in Eli's throat, could smell leather and wood smoke, and something uniquely him. "You don't know what you're asking," he said, his voice low and strained. "The things I've done, the darkness I carry. I know you're a good man who's been carrying too much alone for too long." Clara reached up and touched his face, her fingers trembling. "I know you make Benny laugh. I know you treated my injuries with more care than any doctor ever has. I know you look at me like I'm something worth seeing, and I haven't felt that way in longer than I can remember." Eli's breath caught. His hand came up to cover hers, pressing it against his cheek. "Clara," he whispered, and her name on his lips sounded like a prayer. For a moment, she thought he might kiss her. For a moment, she wanted him to. Then Benny's voice called out from his room, thin and frightened. "Clara? Clara, I had a bad dream." The spell broke. Clara stepped back, her cheeks flushed, her heart pounding. "I should go to him," she said. Eli nodded, his expression a complicated mix of emotions. "I should get some sleep. Early start tomorrow." "Eli," she paused at Benny's door. "When you come back from the bar M, we should talk. About everything." "Yeah." His voice was rough. "Yeah, we should." The next morning, Clara and Benny stood on the porch to watch Eli ride out. His chestnut horse danced with eagerness, sensing the journey ahead. "You'll be careful?" Benny called out, worry evident in his young voice. Eli tipped his hat, a rare smile crossing his face. "Careful as a man can be when he's wrestling wild horses, son." "That's not very reassuring," Clara observed dryly. "Wasn't meant to be." Eli's eyes found hers, holding them for a long moment. "I'll be back in 4 days, 5 at most. You need anything before I go?" "Just come back in one piece." Something warm flickered in his gaze. "Yes, ma'am." He turned his horse and rode toward the rising sun, and Clara watched until he disappeared over the ridge, her hand pressed against the ache in her chest that had nothing to do with her healing ribs. "He's coming back," Benny said quietly. "I know he is. How do you know?" Benny smiled, wise beyond his years. "Because he looks at you the way Pa used to look at his mama, like you're the only person in the whole world worth seeing." Clara's eyes stung. "Benny." "I'm not a little kid, Clara. I know what love looks like." He wheeled his chair back toward the door. "And I know what it looks like when someone's finally found a place to belong." The days of Eli's absence passed slowly. Clara pushed herself harder than she should have, determined to prove she could manage on her own. Her ribs protested every movement, but she gritted her teeth and carried on. Benny helped where he could, his quick mind finding solutions to problems his body couldn't solve. He rigged a pulley system to help Clara carry water buckets. He kept inventory of their supplies, scratching figures in his worn notebook. "We're going to make it," he announced on the 3rd night, looking up from his calculations. "If Eli brings back enough for the payment, and if the chickens keep laying, and if the weather holds for spring planting, that's a lot of ifs," Clara said gently. "But they're possible ifs." Benny's eyes shone with hope. "Before Eli came, we didn't even have ifs. We just had waiting to lose." Clara couldn't argue with that. On the 4th day, she was hanging laundry with her one good arm when she spotted a rider approaching from the east. Her heart leaped before her mind could caution it. But as the rider drew closer, her hope curdled into dread. It wasn't Eli. It was Judge Ashworth's man, the dark-haired one with the cold eyes. Clara dropped the wet shirt she was holding and moved toward the cabin, toward the rifle Samuel had taught her to shoot. But she wasn't fast enough. The man had already dismounted and was striding toward her, his smile as cold as his eyes. "Mrs. Hollister." His voice was smooth, cultured, wrong somehow. "The judge sent me to check on you. Make sure you're recovering well from your unfortunate accident." "I'm fine," Clara kept her voice steady. "You can tell Judge Ashworth his concern is noted, but unnecessary." "Is it?" The man took a step closer. "A woman alone, injured, with a crippled boy to care for. That seems like a situation ripe for further misfortune." Clara's blood ran cold. "Is that a threat?" "Merely an observation." His eyes swept over her, assessing. "Where's your hired hand? The one with the quick tongue and the itchy gun hand." "Away on business." "How convenient." Another step closer. Clara could see the scar now, bisecting his left eyebrow, just like Eli had described. "The judge wanted me to remind you that his offer stands. He's prepared to be very generous, more generous than a stubborn widow deserves." "My answer hasn't changed." "Pity." The man's smile widened, and Clara saw something terrible lurking behind it. Something that enjoyed causing pain. "The judge isn't a patient man, Mrs. Hollister, and neither am I." "Clara?" Benny's voice came from the cabin doorway, trembling with fear. "Clara, who is that?" The man's gaze shifted to Benny, and something hungry entered his expression. "Well, well, the crippled boy. I've heard about you." "Leave him alone." Clara stepped between them, her heart pounding. "Whatever business you have, it's with me, not him." "For now." The man held her gaze for a long moment, then stepped back and touched the brim of his hat. "I'll be seeing you soon, Mrs. Hollister. Real soon." He mounted his horse and rode away without looking back. Clara stood frozen until he was out of sight, then rushed to Benny, gathering him in her arms despite the screaming protest of her ribs. "Who was that?" Benny whispered, his small body shaking. "Clara, he scared me." "I know, sweetheart. He scared me too." "Is he going to come back?" Clara wanted to lie, wanted to promise that everything would be fine and nothing bad would ever touch them. But Benny deserved better than false comfort. "I don't know," she admitted, "but we're going to be ready if he does." That night, Clara loaded Samuel's rifle and propped it beside her bed. She didn't sleep, just sat in the darkness with her hand on the cold metal, listening for hoofbeats. Eli returned on the 5th day, just as he'd promised. Clara heard his horse before she saw him, and she was out the door before her mind could catch up with her body. He was dusty and tired, his clothes bearing the marks of hard work and harder falls. But he was whole, and he was here, and that was all that mattered. "Eli!" Benny shouted from the doorway. "You came back!" "Said I would, didn't I?" Eli dismounted with a grunt, moving stiffly. "Got 15 horses broke and $60 in my pocket. Would have been more, but one of the Mustangs had other ideas about being ridden." Clara stopped a few feet from him, her heart hammering. "You're hurt." "Bruised ribs, maybe a cracked one."
"Nothing that won't heal."
His eyes searched her face. "What happened? Something's wrong, I can see it." "Inside," Clara said. "We need to talk." She told him everything. The visit from Ashworth's man, the threats, veiled and not, the scar through his eyebrow. Eli's face went pale beneath his tan, then flushed with a rage so intense Clara instinctively stepped back. "Blackwood," he breathed. "He was here. He was here and I wasn't. You couldn't have known. I should have been here. Eli slammed his fist against the table, making Benny flinch. He saw the boy's fear and forced himself to take a breath, visibly struggling for control. I'm sorry, son. I didn't mean to scare you. It's okay, Benny said quietly. You're scared too. I can tell. Eli crouched down to Benny's level, his expression softening. Yeah, I am. But not for me. For you and your sister. He glanced at Clara. I need to tell you both something. Something I should have said before I left. He told them then, all of it. About Sarah and Emma. About the raid and the fire and the 8 years of hunting. About the lead that had brought him to Colorado, to Silver Creek, to their door. When he finished, Benny was crying silently, and Clara's face was wet with tears she hadn't noticed shedding. The man who was here, Benny said, his voice thick. He's the one who killed your family? I believe so. Eli's hands were shaking. And now he's threatening mine. The word hung in the air. Mine. As if Clara and Benny already belonged to him. As if they were already a family. Clara knelt beside him, taking his hands in hers. What do we do? We go to the sheriff, Eli said. We tell him what Blackwood did, what he's still doing. Sheriff Cooper is in Ashworth's pocket, Clara said bitterly. Everyone knows it. He won't lift a finger against anyone connected to the judge. Then we gather evidence, find others Ashworth is hurt, build a case that even a corrupt sheriff can't ignore. And if that doesn't work? Eli's jaw tightened. Then I do what I came here to do. I end Blackwood myself. No. Clara's grip on his hands tightened. You said you were tired of running, tired of being alone. You said you wanted to stop. If you kill him, even if he deserves it, you'll be running for the rest of your life. Is that what you want? What I want, Eli said roughly, is to keep you and Benny safe, whatever it takes. Then stay alive. Stay free. Clara lifted his hands and pressed them against her heart. Stay with us. Eli stared at her, his dark eyes glistening. Clara, I know it's crazy. I know we barely know each other. But I also know that you're the first person in a very long time who's made me feel like fighting is worth it. She swallowed hard. Don't throw that away for revenge. For a long moment, Eli didn't speak. Then he freed one hand and cupped her cheek, his touch unbearably gentle. When Sarah died, he said quietly, I thought I'd never feel anything again except anger. I thought that was all I had left. His thumb brushed away a tear she hadn't known was falling. Then I found you lying in the snow, half dead and still worrying about your boy instead of yourself. And something inside me that I thought was gone forever started to wake up. Eli, I ain't good with words, never have been. But I need you to know that whatever happens next, meeting you was the best thing that's happened to me in 8 years. He took a shaky breath. Maybe the best thing ever. Clara rose up on her toes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was soft, tentative, a question more than an answer. Eli made a sound low in his throat and pulled her closer, deepening the kiss with a desperate tenderness that made Clara's knees weak. When they finally parted, both breathing hard, Benny was grinning from ear to ear. Does this mean you're staying? He asked, hopefully. Eli looked at Clara, a question in his eyes. She nodded. Yeah, son, Eli said, his voice rough with emotion. I reckon it does. The next morning, they rode into Silver Creek together. Clara sat beside Eli on the wagon seat, her injured shoulder protesting, but her spirit stronger than it had been in months. Benny sat in the back, his wheeled chair secured with rope, his face bright with excitement at the rare trip to town. They went to the bank first. Clara walked in with her head high, Eli a solid presence at her side, and counted out the full payment, plus interest, onto Harold Ashworth's desk. The judge's face was a mask of controlled fury as he wrote out the receipt. "I see your fortunes have improved, Mrs. Hollister." "They have," Clara replied coolly. "Funny what a little help can accomplish." Ashworth's eyes flickered to Eli, and something dangerous passed through them. "Indeed. Though I'd be careful about the company you keep, if I were you. Not everyone in Silver Creek appreciates outsiders meddling in local affairs." "I appreciate it just fine," said a voice from the doorway. Clara turned to see Dr. Ezekiel Patterson stepping into the bank, his weathered face creased with a smile. The old doctor had been a friend of Samuel's father, one of the few people in town who'd shown Clara any kindness since her husband's death. "Doc Patterson," Ashworth said, his voice tight. "This is private business." "Is it? Looked to me like Mrs. Hollister was just completing a lawful transaction." Patterson crossed to stand beside Clara, his presence a silent declaration of support. "Unless you're planning to make that difficult for some reason." The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Ashworth's smile was sharp as a blade. "Not at all. Mrs. Hollister's payment is received in full. She's free to go about her business." "Glad to hear it." Patterson tipped his hat.
"Clara, Eli, why don't you join me for coffee at the hotel? We have some catching up to do." They left the bank together, and Clara felt Ashworth's eyes boring into her back every step of the way. Over coffee, Patterson listened as Eli explained their suspicions about Marcus Blackwood. The old doctor's face grew grave. "I've had my own concerns about Ashworth for some time," he admitted. "Ever since the Hendersons lost their farm last spring. Good people, the Hendersons. Paid their mortgage on time for 15 years. Then suddenly the bank claims they missed a payment, and before anyone knows what's happening, Ashworth owns their land." "You think he's falsifying records?" Clara asked. "I think a lot of things. Proving them is another matter." Patterson sipped his coffee thoughtfully. "But you've given me an idea. The territorial marshal is due in Prescott next month for the circuit court. If we could gather enough evidence, enough testimony from folks Ashworth has wronged, we could bring him down legally," Eli finished, "without anyone having to resort to other measures." Patterson's eyes met Eli's, understanding passing between them. "Exactly. It won't be quick, and it won't be easy, but it might be the only way to get real justice." "I'm in," Clara said immediately. "Whatever you need from me." "Same here," Eli agreed, "but we'll need to be careful. If Ashworth suspects what we're planning, he'll move against us," Clara finished. "Against all of us." Patterson nodded gravely. "Then we'd best make sure he doesn't suspect. Keep your heads down, go about your business, and let me do some quiet asking around. There are more good people in this town than you might think. They're just scared." "Fear's a powerful thing," Eli said quietly. "But so is hope." They parted ways with Patterson outside the hotel, Clara feeling more optimistic than she had in months. They had a plan now. Allies. A chance at real justice instead of just survival. But as they loaded their supplies into the wagon, Clara noticed Eli had gone still beside her, his body rigid with tension. "What is it?" "Across the street," Eli said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Don't look directly. The man coming out of the saloon." Clara glanced casually in that direction and felt her blood turn to ice. It was him, Ashworth's man, Marcus Blackwood, and he was staring directly at Eli with a smile that promised death. "He recognizes me," Eli said flatly. "He knows who I am." "How? It's been 8 years." "Doesn't matter how. What matters is that our timeline just got a whole lot shorter." Eli helped Clara onto the wagon seat, his movements controlled but urgent. "We need to get back to the farm. Now." As they rode out of town, Clara looked back once. Blackwood was still standing outside the saloon, watching them go. He hadn't stopped smiling. The ride back to the farm felt longer than it should have. Clara kept her eyes on the horizon, but her mind was fixed on the image of Blackwood's smile, cold and knowing, like a wolf who'd finally cornered his prey. "He won't wait," Eli said, breaking the heavy silence. "Now that he knows I'm here, he'll move fast. Tonight, maybe tomorrow. Then we don't give him the chance." Clara's voice was steadier than she felt. "We go to the marshal ourselves. Forget waiting for Patterson to gather evidence. The marshal's in Prescott. That's 3 days' ride, minimum." Eli's jaw tightened. "I can't leave you and Benny alone that long. Not now. Then we all go. Clara, Benny can't make that journey. Not in winter. Not over those mountain roads." She knew he was right. The knowledge sat like a stone in her chest. "So what do we do?" she asked quietly. Eli was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with something that sounded almost like fear. "We fortify. We prepare. And we pray that Patterson can move faster than I think he can." They reached the farm as the sun began its descent toward the mountains. Eli unhitched the horses with quick, efficient movements, while Clara helped Benny down from the wagon. "Something happened in town," Benny said. It wasn't a question. "Something bad." Clara hesitated, but Eli answered before she could decide how much to share. "The man who came here before, Blackwood. He saw us in town. He knows who I am." Benny's face went pale. "Does that mean he's coming?" "It means he might." Eli crouched down to the boy's level, his expression serious but calm. "I need you to be brave, son. Can you do that?" Benny swallowed hard, then nodded. "I can be brave." "Good man." Eli squeezed his shoulder. "Now, I need you to go inside and make a list of every window and door in this cabin. Can you do that for me?" "Yes, sir." As Benny wheeled himself toward the cabin, Clara turned to Eli. "You're scaring him." "I'm preparing him. There's a difference." Eli's eyes met hers. "That boy's been through more than most grown men. He can handle the truth." "And what is the truth? That we're trapped here waiting for a killer to come finish what he started 8 years ago?" "The truth is that I'm not going to let anything happen to either of you." Eli stepped closer, his hands finding her shoulders. "I've lost one family, Clara. I won't lose another." The word family made her heart clench. "We're not your responsibility, Eli. You could leave, ride out tonight and draw Blackwood away from us." "Is that what you want?" Clara's eyes stung. "No, God help me, no." Eli pulled her against his chest, his arms wrapping around her with fierce tenderness. "Then stop suggesting it. We're in this together, all 3 of us." They spent the rest of the daylight hours preparing. Eli boarded up the windows that faced the most vulnerable approaches. Clara loaded every weapon in the house and positioned them within easy reach. Benny, determined to contribute, organized their food stores and filled every container they had with water. "In case they try to wait us out," he explained when Clara raised an eyebrow at the row of full buckets. "I read about sieges in one of Pa's history books." "Smart thinking," Eli said, and Benny beamed with pride. As darkness fell, they gathered around the small table for a meal none of them had much appetite for. The cabin felt smaller than usual, the silence heavier. "Eli?" Benny's voice was quiet. "Can I ask you something?" "Course you can." "If Blackwood comes, if something happens," the boy's voice trembled, "will you promise to take care of Clara, no matter what?" "Benny," Clara started,
But Eli held up his hand. "Nothing's going to happen to your sister," Eli said firmly. "Or to you. But yes, son, I promise. I'll take care of both of you, no matter what." Benny nodded, some of the tension leaving his thin shoulders. Okay, good. Now, Eli pushed back from the table. "I want you to sleep in Clara's room tonight. Both of you. I'll keep watch out here." "You can't stay awake all night," Clara protested. "Watch me." She wanted to argue, but the set of his jaw told her it would be pointless. Instead, she helped Benny into the small bedroom and settled him on the floor beside her bed, wrapped in every blanket they could spare. "Clara?" Benny whispered as she was about to blow out the candle. "Yes, sweetheart? I'm glad Eli came, even with everything that's happening." His eyes shone in the flickering light. "I'm glad we're not alone anymore." Clara's throat tightened. "Me too, Benny. Me too." She didn't sleep. Couldn't. Not with Eli sitting vigil in the next room, and danger lurking somewhere in the darkness outside. Every creak of the cabin settling, every whisper of wind against the walls, made her heart jump. Sometime after midnight, she gave up trying and slipped out of the bedroom, careful not to wake Benny. Eli sat in a chair facing the door, Samuel's rifle across his knees. He didn't look up as she approached, but his voice was soft when he spoke. "Couldn't sleep?" "No." Clara settled into the chair beside him. "You should rest. I can keep watch for a while." "I'm fine." "Eli." He finally looked at her, and Clara saw the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight of too many sleepless nights and too much grief carried for too long. "I keep thinking about that night," he said quietly. "The night they came for Sarah and Emma. I was 50 miles away, sleeping under the stars, dreaming about coming home to them. And while I was dreaming, they were dying. That wasn't your fault." "Wasn't it?" His laugh was bitter. "I should have been there. Should have protected them. That was my job, my only job. And I failed." Clara reached out and took his hand. "You couldn't have known." "Doesn't matter. They're still dead." His fingers tightened around hers. "And now, here I am, 8 years later, and I've put another family in the crosshairs of the same man. What kind of fool does that make me?" "The kind who stopped running," Clara said softly. "The kind who chose to fight instead of keep drifting." Eli was silent for a long moment. Then he lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss against her knuckles. "When this is over," he said, his voice rough, "when Blackwood's gone and Ashworth's in chains and this whole nightmare is finished, I want to marry you, Clara Hollister, if you'll have me." Clara's breath caught. "Eli." "I know it's too soon. I know we've only known each other a few weeks, but I've spent 8 years feeling dead inside, and you made me feel alive again." His eyes searched hers. "I don't want to wait anymore. Life's too short and too uncertain to waste on waiting." "Yes," Clara whispered, the word escaping before she could overthink it. "Yes, Eli. When this is over, yes." The smile that broke across his face was like sunrise after a long night. He pulled her close and kissed her, deep and tender and full of promise. They stayed that way, wrapped in each other's arms, until the first gray light of dawn crept through the cracks in the boarded windows. The attack didn't come that night, or the next, or the next. By the 4th day, the tension had become almost unbearable. Clara found herself jumping at shadows, snapping at Benny over small things, then immediately feeling terrible about it. "He's playing with us," Eli said grimly as they stood on the porch, watching the empty road. "Letting us stew in our own fear. It's a tactic, makes people sloppy, makes them make mistakes." "Then we don't make mistakes," Clara replied, though her voice wavered. That afternoon, Dr. Patterson rode up to the farm, his face grave, but his eyes bright with purpose. "I've been busy," he said,
accepting the cup of coffee from Clara. Talked to a lot of folks these past few days. The Hendersons, the Morales family, the widow Turner. All of them lost property to Ashworth under suspicious circumstances. And all of them are willing to testify. How many? Eli asked. 7 families so far, and that's just in Silver Creek. I've got word that there are more in the surrounding counties. Patterson's jaw set. That man has been stealing land for years, using his position to falsify records and intimidate anyone who tried to fight back. But people are angry, Eli. Scared, yes, but angry too. They're ready to stand up. When can we move? I've sent word to the territorial marshal. He's agreed to come early. Should be in Prescott by week's end. If we can get our witnesses there safely. Ashworth won't let that happen, Clara said. The moment he finds out what we're planning, he'll do whatever it takes to stop us. Then we don't let him find out. Patterson leaned forward. I've arranged for the families to leave at different times, by different routes. They'll all converge on Prescott the day before the marshal arrives. By the time Ashworth realizes what's happening, it'll be too late. What about Blackwood? Eli's voice was hard. He's the wild card in all this. As long as he's out there. I've thought about that too. Patterson's expression grew serious. There's a federal warrant out for a man matching Blackwood's description. Wanted for murder in 3 territories. If we can prove he's the same man, he hangs, Eli finished quietly, or spends the rest of his life in prison. Either way, he never hurts anyone again. Clara looked at Eli, saw the conflict playing out across his features. Part of him wanted to end this himself, wanted to put a bullet in Blackwood and be done with it. But another part, the part that had chosen to stop running and start building, knew that Patterson's way was better. How do we prove it? Eli asked, finally. That Blackwood is the man on that warrant. The warrant includes a description of a distinctive tattoo, a snake coiled around a knife, on his left shoulder blade. Patterson's eyes met Eli's. Have you ever seen Blackwood without his shirt? No, but I know someone who might have. Clara understood immediately. The saloon girls. If Blackwood's been in Silver Creek for any length of time. Exactly, Patterson nodded. There's a woman named Rose who works at the Silver Dollar. She's helped me before. If anyone would know about that tattoo, it's her. I'll go, Clara said, surprising herself. Both men stared at her. Clara, no, Eli started. Think about it. Blackwood knows your face, Eli. He's watching for you. But me? I'm just the cursed widow, remember? Nobody pays attention to me. She lifted her chin. I can get in and out of town without raising suspicion. It's too dangerous. Everything is dangerous right now. At least, this is dangerous with a purpose. Eli looked like he wanted to argue. But Patterson spoke first. She's right, Eli. And she's smart. It might be our best chance. For a long moment, Eli said nothing. Then he let out a heavy breath. If you're doing this, you're not doing it alone. I'll wait outside town. Anything goes wrong, anything at all, you get out of here and ride straight to me. I can do that. Clara, Eli caught her face between his hands. I mean it. Don't try to be a hero. Get the information and get out. Promise me. I promise. She left at first light the next morning, dressed in her plainest clothes, with her hair tucked under a worn bonnet. Eli rode with her as far as the old Miller homestead, about 2 miles from town, then dismounted and helped her down from her horse. I'll be right here, he said, his voice tight with worry. 2 hours. If you're not back in 2 hours, I'm coming in after you. 2 hours, Clara agreed. She kissed him once, hard and fast, then mounted up and rode toward Silver Creek without looking back. If she looked back, she might lose her nerve. The town was quiet at this hour, most folks still eating breakfast or starting their morning chores. Clara tied her horse behind the general store and made her way to the Silver Dollar through the back alleys, avoiding the main street where she might be recognized. The saloon was nearly empty.
Just a couple of old-timers nursing their morning whiskeys, and a bored-looking bartender wiping down glasses. Clara spotted a woman matching Patterson's description, sitting alone at a table in the corner, her red hair faded and her face bearing the marks of a hard life. "Rose?" Clara asked quietly, sliding into the seat across from her. The woman's eyes narrowed. "Who's asking?" "A friend of Dr. Patterson's. He said you might be able to help me."
Recognition flickered in Rose's expression. "You're the Hollister widow. The one they say is cursed."
"That's me." Rose studied her for a long moment, then let out a humorless laugh. "Cursed. That's rich. Only curse on you is being a woman alone in a world run by men like Ashworth." She leaned forward. "What do you need?" "Information. About a man called Marcus Blackwood." Something shifted in Rose's face. Fear, quickly masked. "What about him?" "I need to know if he has a tattoo. A snake coiled around a knife on his left shoulder blade." Rose was quiet for so long that Clara began to fear she'd made a terrible mistake. Then the older woman spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "He does. I've seen it." Clara's heart pounded. "Would you be willing to testify to that? Before a marshal?" "You're trying to take him down." It wasn't a question. "Him and Ashworth both?" "Yes." Rose's hands trembled as she reached for her glass. "You don't know what you're dealing with, girl. Blackwood isn't just some hired gun. He's a monster. The things I've seen him do." "I know exactly what he is," Clara said quietly. "He killed my friend's wife and daughter 8 years ago, burned their homestead to the ground while they slept." Rose's eyes widened. "Your friend? The tall one with the dark hair? The one who's been staying at your farm?" "Yes." "Then you know why I'm scared." Rose's voice cracked. "Blackwood doesn't leave witnesses. Anyone who crosses him ends up dead or worse." "Not this time." Clara reached across the table and took Rose's hand. "This time, we're going to stop him. But we need your help. We need someone who can identify that tattoo. If I testify, he'll kill me." "Not if he's in chains. And he will be, Rose. I swear to you, he will be." For a long, agonizing moment, Rose said nothing. Then she squeezed Clara's hand, and Clara saw something kindle in her eyes. Not hope exactly. Something harder, something like determination. "There's a back room upstairs," Rose said quietly. "Ashworth uses it sometimes for private meetings. There's a loose floorboard under the bed. He keeps papers there. Records. I've seen them." Clara's breath caught. "What kind of records?" "The kind that could put him away for a long time. Land deals, payments to Blackwood, names of people who got in his way, and what happened to them." Rose's grip tightened. "I couldn't take them myself, too risky. But if someone else were to find them..." "Can you get me in there?" "Tonight. Ashworth's got a meeting with some investors from Denver. He'll be at the hotel until late." Rose met Clara's eyes. "Be at the back door of the saloon at 10 o'clock. I'll let you in." Clara nodded, her mind racing. This was more than she'd hoped for, more than she'd dared to imagine. "Thank you, Rose." "Don't thank me yet." The older woman's face was grim. "Just make sure that bastard pays for what he's done." Clara left the saloon the same way she'd come in, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. She was halfway to her horse when a voice stopped her cold. "Mrs. Hollister, what a pleasant surprise." She turned slowly, her blood turning to ice. Marcus Blackwood stood at the mouth of the alley, blocking her only exit. His cold eye swept over her, and his lips curved in that terrible smile. "I was hoping we'd get a chance to talk," he said, taking a step toward her. "Just the two of us." Clara's hand moved instinctively toward the small pistol hidden in her skirt pocket.
I have nothing to say to you. No? That's a shame, because I have so much to say to you. Another step. About your friend Eli, for instance. About the things I did to his pretty little wife before I killed her. Clara's stomach turned. You're a monster. I'm a practical man, Mrs. Hollister. A man who removes obstacles. And right now, you and your crippled boy and your lovesick cowboy are obstacles. His smile widened. But obstacles can be removed. If you touch any of us, Eli will hunt you down. Will he? The way he hunted me for 8 years and never even got close? Blackwood laughed, a cold, cruel sound. Your Eli is a broken man chasing ghosts. He couldn't protect his family then, and he can't protect you now. Clara's fear crystallized into something harder, something that felt like rage. You're wrong, she said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. Eli's not the same man he was 8 years ago, and neither am I. She pulled the pistol from her pocket and aimed it at Blackwood's chest. His smile faltered, just for a moment. Then he laughed again. You think you can shoot me, little widow? You think you have it in you to take a life? I think I have it in me to protect my family, Clara replied. Whatever it takes. They stood frozen like that, predator and prey, neither willing to make the first move. Clara's finger trembled on the trigger. She'd never shot a man before, never even aimed a gun at one. But she would. If he moved toward her, she would. The sound of approaching hoofbeats broke the standoff. Blackwood's head turned, and Clara saw her chance. She bolted past him, her skirts tangling around her legs, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. She reached her horse just as Eli came thundering around the corner of the general store, his face white with fear. Clara! I'm okay, she gasped, hauling herself into the saddle. I'm okay, let's go, now! They rode hard out of Silver Creek, not slowing until the town was far behind them. Only then did Eli reach out and grab her reins, pulling both horses to a stop. What happened? His voice was ragged. I heard you'd been seen in the alley behind the saloon, and I thought... Blackwood found me. Clara was shaking now, the adrenaline fading and leaving cold terror in its wake. He cornered me in the alley, said things about Sarah, about what he did to her. Eli's face went gray. Did he hurt you? No, I pulled my gun on him. A hysterical laugh bubbled up in her throat. I actually pulled a gun on Marcus Blackwood. Jesus Christ, Clara. I know. She sucked in a shaky breath. But Eli, I got what we needed. Rose confirmed the tattoo, and she told me something else. Ashworth keeps records in a hidden room at the saloon. Land deals, payments to Blackwood, everything. She's going to let me in tonight to get them. Eli stared at her like she'd lost her mind. Absolutely not. Eli, you just had a gun pointed at Marcus Blackwood, and you want to go back? Tonight? Into Ashworth's own territory? It might be our only chance. If we can get those records, we'll have everything we need. Blackwood goes to prison, Ashworth loses everything, and we're finally safe. Or you get caught, and Blackwood kills you. I won't get caught. Clara reached out and gripped his arm. Eli, please, I can do this. Let me do this. The war playing out on his face was painful to watch. Fear battling with trust. Protectiveness warring with respect. If I can't talk you out of this, he said finally, his voice strained, then I'm coming with you. No, you can't. Clara shook her head firmly. Blackwood will be watching for you. If you show up in town tonight, he'll know something's wrong. I have to do this alone. Clara, I'll be careful. I'll be in and out before anyone knows I'm there. She cupped his face in her hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. Trust me, Eli. Please. For a long, terrible moment, she thought he would refuse, that he would throw her over his saddle and ride her back to the farm and lock her in the cabin until this whole nightmare was over. Then his shoulders sagged, and she saw acceptance in his eyes. Acceptance and fear, and something that looked like pride. 2 hours, he said roughly. You have 2 hours. After that, I'm coming in after you, and I don't care who tries to stop me. Clara kissed him, fierce and desperate. 2 hours, she promised. I'll be back before you know it. The hours until nightfall passed like years. Clara tried to rest, but every time she closed her eyes, she saw Blackwood's smile, heard his voice describing what he'd done to Sarah. She finally gave up and spent the afternoon helping Benny with his reading, grateful for the distraction. You're going somewhere tonight, Benny said quietly, not looking up from his book. Something dangerous. Clara's hands stilled on the mending she'd been pretending to work on. What makes you say that? Eli's been pacing like a caged animal since you got back, and you keep looking at the clock like it owes you money. Benny finally met her eyes, and Clara saw the fear he was trying to hide. Are you going to be okay? I'm going to be fine, sweetheart. You don't know that. No, Clara admitted. I don't. But I know that what I'm doing tonight could help keep us all safe, could help put the men who want to hurt us behind bars where they belong. Benny was quiet for a long moment. Then he wheeled himself closer and took her hand. Ma used to say that courage isn't about not being scared. It's about being scared and doing the right thing anyway. His grip tightened. You're the bravest person I know, Clara. Braver than Pa was. Braver than anyone. Clara's eyes stung. Benny, just promise me you'll come back. Promise me. She pulled him into a fierce hug, breathing in the little boy's smell of him, soap and dirt and something uniquely Benny. I promise, she whispered. I promise I'll come back. At 9:30, Clara put on her darkest dress and tucked her hair under a black bonnet. Eli helped her saddle her horse, his movements stiff and his jaw tight with suppressed worry. Remember, he said, checking her cinch for the 3rd time. In and out. Don't take any unnecessary risks. If something feels wrong, you get out of there. I know. And if Blackwood shows up, I run. I don't try to fight. I don't try to be brave. I just run. Clara caught his hands and held them still. Eli, I've got this. He stared at her for a long moment, his dark eyes searching her face as if memorizing every detail. Then he pulled her close and kissed her with a desperate intensity that stole her breath. I love you, he said against her lips. I know I haven't said it enough, but I love you, Clara, more than I've ever loved anyone. I love you too. She touched his face, felt the roughness of his stubble against her palm. I'll see you in 2 hours. She rode toward Silver Creek, with her heart pounding and her mind sharp. The night was cold and clear, the stars bright overhead. The kind of night that made the world feel vast and empty and full of possibility. The back door of the Silver Dollar was unlocked, just as Rose had promised. Clara slipped inside, moving quietly through the darkened hallway toward the narrow stairs that led to the upper floor. Rose was waiting at the top, her face pale in the dim light of a single candle. Ashworth's still at the hotel, she whispered. You've got maybe an hour before he comes back. The room's at the end of the hall, last door on the left. Thank you, Rose. Don't thank me. Just get those papers and get out. Rose pressed something into her hand. A key. Locks from the inside, in case someone comes. Clara nodded and made her way down the hall, her footsteps silent on the worn carpet. The door Rose had indicated was plain and unremarkable, nothing to suggest the secrets it held. The room beyond was small and sparsely furnished. A bed, a desk, a wardrobe. Clara moved quickly to the bed and knelt down, running her fingers along the floorboards until she found the one that gave slightly under pressure. The loose board came up easily, revealing a metal box hidden in the space beneath. Clara's hands trembled as she lifted it out and flipped open the lid. Papers. Dozens of them. Land deeds, bank records, letters in Ashworth's cramped handwriting. And there, beneath the rest, a leather-bound journal with dates and names and amounts that made Clara's blood run cold. This was it. Everything they needed. Evidence of fraud, extortion, even murder. Ashworth had documented his crimes with meticulous precision, as if he'd never imagined anyone would find them. Clara stuffed the papers into the bag she'd brought, working quickly but carefully. She was so focused on her task that she almost didn't hear the footsteps in the hallway. Almost. She froze, her heart leaping into her throat. The footsteps stopped outside the door. The handle rattled. "Rose?" A man's voice, low and suspicious. "Rose, you in there?" Clara held her breath, praying the lock would hold. "Rose ain't here," came another voice. Blackwood. Clara would recognize that cold, smooth tone anywhere. "She left 10 minutes ago. Said she wasn't feeling well." "Then who's in there? I saw the light under the door." "Only one way to find out." Something heavy slammed against the door. Once. Twice. On the third impact, the lock gave way and the door burst open. Clara was already moving. She threw herself toward the window, the bag of papers clutched against her chest, and prayed it wasn't too far to the ground. "Stop her!" Blackwood's voice cut through the chaos. "Don't let her get away!" Clara hit the window shoulder first, feeling it give way in a shower of glass. For one terrifying moment, she was falling, the cold night air rushing past her face. Then she hit the awning below, rolled, and dropped to the alley floor with a bone-jarring impact. Pain lanced through her ankle, but she forced herself up and ran. Behind her, she heard shouting, boots pounding downstairs. Blackwood's voice, cold and furious, ordering his men to spread out and find her. Clara ducked into a narrow gap between two buildings, pressing herself against the wall and forcing her ragged breathing to slow. Her ankle throbbed with every heartbeat, but she couldn't stop. Not yet. She waited until the sounds of pursuit moved away from her hiding spot, then slipped out and made for the place where she'd left her horse. It was gone. Of course it was. They'd found it, or someone had stolen it, or... A hand clamped over her mouth from behind. Clara's scream was muffled as she was dragged backward into the shadows. She fought wildly, kicking and clawing, until a familiar voice cut through her panic. "Clara! Clara, it's me!" Eli. She went limp with relief as he turned her to face him, his eyes wide with fear. "What are you doing here?" she gasped. "You said 2 hours." Couldn't wait. Something felt wrong. His gaze dropped to the bag she clutched. "Did you get them?" "Yes, everything. But Blackwood found me. He's got men all over." "I know. I saw." Eli grabbed her hand. "We need to move. Now." They ran through the back alleys of Silver Creek, Eli leading the way with the sure-footedness of someone who'd spent a lifetime navigating dangerous places. Clara's ankles screamed with every step, but she gritted her teeth and kept going. They were almost to the edge of town when Blackwood stepped out of the shadows in front of them. Well, well. His smile was terrible in the dim light. The loving couple, reunited at last. Eli pushed Clara behind him, his hand dropping to his gun. "Step aside, Blackwood." "Or what? You'll shoot me?" Blackwood laughed. "We both know how this ends, Tannick. It ended the same way 8 years ago, with everyone you loved dead, and you too broken to stop it." That was then. Eli's voice was steady, but Clara could feel the tension vibrating through him. This is now. Is it?
Look at you, playing house with another man's widow, pretending you can have a normal life, pretending the ghosts don't wake you up at night." Blackwood's eyes glittered. I remember Sarah's face when she realized no one was coming to save her. I wonder if your new woman will look the same way. Eli moved so fast, Clara barely saw it. One moment he was standing in front of her. The next he had crossed the distance to Blackwood and slammed his fist into the other man's jaw. Blackwood staggered, but didn't fall. His hand came up with a knife, slashing at Eli's chest. Eli twisted away, but not fast enough. A line of red appeared across his ribs, soaking through his shirt. "Eli!" Clara screamed. The two men grappled, crashing against the wall of the nearest building. Blackwood was faster, but Eli was stronger, his rage lending him power that 8 years of grief had honed to a deadly edge. Clara looked around desperately for something, anything she could use to help. Her hand closed around a loose board from a broken fence. Not much of a weapon, but it would have to do. She waited for her moment. When Blackwood managed to get his knife hand free and raised it for a killing blow, Clara swung the board with all her strength. It connected with the back of Blackwood's head with a sickening crack. The man crumpled, the knife falling from his fingers. Eli scrambled free, breathing hard, his hand pressed against his bleeding side. "Clara!" His voice was hoarse. "Clara, you... Is he dead?" She couldn't look away from Blackwood's motionless form. "Did I kill him?" Eli knelt and checked for a pulse. "No, he's alive, just unconscious." He looked up at her, and even in the dim light, she could see the fierce pride in his eyes. "You saved my life." "You've saved mine enough times." Clara's voice shook. Seemed only fair to return the favor. Despite everything, Eli laughed. It was a broken sound, half sob and half genuine mirth. But it was the most beautiful thing Clara had ever heard. "We need to go," he said, struggling to his feet, "before his men find us." "What about him?" Clara gestured to Blackwood. "We can't just leave him." "We're not." Eli pulled a length of rope from his belt and quickly bound Blackwood's hands and feet. "We're taking him with us." It took both of them to haul Blackwood's unconscious body onto Eli's horse. Clara mounted behind Eli, her arms wrapped around his waist, the bag of evidence pressed between them. They rode hard through the night, away from Silver Creek, away from Ashworth's men, toward an uncertain future that suddenly felt full of possibility. By the time they reached the farm, dawn was breaking. Benny was waiting on the porch, his face white with worry, his hands gripping the arms of his chair. "You came back," he breathed as Clara dismounted. "You came back." "Told you I would." Clara knelt and hugged him fiercely. "I always keep my promises." "Is that—" Benny's eyes widened as Eli hauled Blackwood's still unconscious form from the horse. "Is that him? The man who—" "Yes, son." Eli's voice was grim. "That's him." They secured Blackwood in the barn, tying him to a support post with enough rope to hold a wild Mustang. Then Eli collapsed into a chair in the cabin while Clara tended to his wound. "It's not deep," she said, cleaning the blood away with hands that still trembled. "But it'll need stitches." "Done worse to myself shaving." "Liar." But she managed a small smile. "Eli, what do we do now? Blackwood's men will come looking for him." "Let them come." Eli's eyes were hard. "We've got the evidence. We've got Blackwood. All we need is to get to Prescott before Ashworth realizes what's happened." "That's a 3-day ride." "I know." He caught her hand and pressed his lips to her palm. "But we're not alone anymore. Patterson's got 7 families ready to testify. The territorial marshal is waiting for us. We just have to hold on a little longer." Dr. Patterson arrived at the farm 2 hours later.
his face breaking into a relieved smile when he saw them all safe. "I heard there was some commotion in town last night," he said, accepting a cup of coffee from Clara. "Ashworth's men tearing the place apart looking for someone?" "That would be us," Eli said dryly. "I figured." Patterson's eyes fell on the bag of papers sitting on the table. "Is that what I think it is?" "Everything." Clara pushed the bag toward him. "Land deeds, bank records, payments to Blackwood, names of people he's had killed. Ashworth wrote it all down." Patterson rifled through the papers, his expression growing more incredulous with each page. My God, the man documented his own crimes. Did he think he was untouchable? He was, for a long time. Eli's jaw tightened. Not anymore. And Blackwood? In the barn, tied up and waiting for justice. Patterson sat back, shaking his head in wonder. "You two have done more in one night than I've been able to accomplish in years of quiet investigation. The marshal's going to have a field day with this." "Can we get to Prescott safely?" Clara asked. "Ashworth must know by now that his records are missing." "He does. Word is he's offering a reward for information about the thieves who broke into his private room." Patterson's smile was grim. "But he doesn't know who took them. Not yet." "He'll figure it out soon enough," Eli said. "Then we move fast. I've already sent word to the families. They're leaving today. Different routes, different times, just like we planned. If we leave now, we can stay ahead of any pursuit." "Benny can't make that journey," Clara said. "The mountain roads, in winter." "He won't have to." Patterson's expression softened. "Martha Simmons has agreed to take him in until this is over. Her place is outside town, well protected, and Ashworth has no reason to connect her to any of this." Clara looked at Benny, who had been listening silently from his chair. The boy's face was pale, but determined. "I can do it," he said before she could ask. "I can be brave." "I know you can, sweetheart." Clara knelt beside him, taking his hands. "But I don't want to leave you. Not again. You have to." Benny's voice was steady, older than his years. "You have to finish this. For Pa. For Eli's family. For all the people Ashworth has hurt." He squeezed her hands. "I'll be okay, Clara. I promise." Clara pulled him into a fierce embrace, blinking back tears. "I love you, Benny. So much." "I love you too." His thin arms tightened around her. "Now go be a hero." They left within the hour. Patterson drove a wagon with Blackwood hidden in the back under a pile of hay, while Eli and Clara rode alongside. Benny went with Martha Simmons, his brave smile breaking Clara's heart as they parted. The first day of travel passed without incident. They moved fast, taking back roads Patterson knew well, avoiding the main routes where Ashworth's men might be watching. That night, they made camp in a sheltered hollow, too tired to do more than eat cold biscuits and take turns keeping watch. Clara sat with Eli by the small fire, her head resting on his shoulder, watching the stars wheel overhead. "After this is over," she said quietly, "after Ashworth's in prison and Blackwood's facing justice, what then?" Eli was silent for a moment. "I've been thinking about that." "And?" "And I reckon I'm done drifting." He turned to look at her, his dark eyes soft in the firelight. "I want to build something that lasts, with you and Benny, if you'll have me." "I already said yes," Clara reminded him with a small smile. "I know, but that was in the middle of a crisis. I wanted to make sure you meant it." "I meant it." Clara lifted her head and kissed him softly. "I've never meant anything more in my life." The second day brought trouble. They were crossing a narrow pass through the mountains when Eli pulled his horse to a sudden stop, his body going rigid. "Riders," he said quietly. "Coming up behind us. Fast." Clara turned and saw the dust cloud in the distance. At least half a dozen men, maybe more, riding hard.
How did they find us? Patterson's face was grim. Doesn't matter how. What matters is what we do about it. Eli's hand dropped to his gun. Doc, you and Clara keep moving. Get to Prescott no matter what. Eli, no, Clara started. I'll hold them off. Buy you time. You can't fight 6 men alone. I can try.
His eyes met hers, and she saw acceptance in them. Resignation. Clara, those papers are more important than I am. More important than any of us. They're the only chance those families have at justice. I'm not leaving you. Yes, you are. Eli reached out and cupped her face. I love you, Clara Hollister. I love you and I love that brave boy. And I will do whatever it takes to give you both a chance at a real life. Even if that means dying here. Eli. Go. His voice cracked. Please. Go. Clara stared at him, her heart breaking into 1,000 pieces. Then she grabbed his shirt and pulled him into a fierce kiss. Don't you dare die on me, Elijah Tanner, she said against his lips. Don't you dare. She turned her horse and rode, following Patterson's wagon up the mountain pass, every hoofbeat taking her further from the man she loved. She didn't look back. If she looked back, she'd never leave. The sound of gunfire echoed through the mountains behind her. Clara pushed her horse harder, tears streaming down her face, praying with every breath that Eli would somehow survive, that he would find his way back to her, that this wouldn't be another grave she'd have to visit, another man she'd have to mourn. The pass opened onto a wider road, and Patterson whipped the wagon horses into a gallop. Prescott's only 2 miles, he shouted. We're almost there. Clara looked back then. She couldn't help it. The dust cloud had stopped at the pass entrance. The gunfire had ceased. She couldn't tell what that meant. Couldn't see through the tears blurring her vision. Please, she thought. Please let him be alive. They rode into Prescott like demons were on their heels, drawing startled looks from the townsfolk going about their morning business. Patterson headed straight for the territorial marshal's office, pulling the wagon to a stop in front of a weathered building with a star painted on the door. A tall man with a silver mustache and keen eyes stepped out onto the porch. Dr. Patterson, I was starting to worry. Marshal Graves. Patterson was already climbing down from the wagon. We've got a situation. I can see that. The marshal's eyes swept over Clara's tear-stained face, the hay-covered wagon, the distant sound of gunfire still echoing in the mountains. You'd better come inside and tell me everything. Clara followed on numb legs, her mind still fixed on Eli, alone in that pass with 6 of Ashworth's men. The next 2 hours were a blur. She answered questions, handed over papers, watched as Patterson explained the web of corruption they'd uncovered. Marshal Graves listened with growing anger, his weathered face darkening with each new revelation. I've had my suspicions about Ashworth for years, he said finally, paging through the journal that documented the judge's crimes. But I never had proof. Not like this. Will it be enough? Clara asked. To put him away? Enough? Mrs. Hollister, this is enough to hang him. The marshal set down the journal. But first, we need to find him, and we need to deal with the men he sent after you. There's a man, Clara said, her voice catching. Elijah Tanner. He stayed behind to hold them off. He's important to me. Understanding softened the marshal's gaze. I'll send men immediately. If your Elijah is still alive, we'll find him. If he's still alive. The words echoed in Clara's head as she sat in the marshal's office, waiting. She'd done everything she could, delivered the evidence, told her story. Now all she could do was wait and pray. The sun was setting when the door opened and a deputy stepped inside. Marshal, the posse's back. Clara was on her feet before she could think. Eli? They found him, ma'am. The deputy's expression was unreadable. He's alive. Clara's knees buckled. She grabbed the edge of the desk to keep from falling. Where is he? Doc Sawyer's place. He's hurt pretty bad, but the doc says he'll make it. She didn't remember leaving the marshal's office. Didn't remember running through the streets of Prescott. All she remembered was bursting through the door of the doctor's surgery and seeing Eli lying on a narrow bed, bandages wrapped around his chest and his arm in a sling. But alive. Alive. Clara! His voice was hoarse, but his eyes lit up when he saw her. You made it. We made it. She crossed to him in 2 steps and took his hand, pressing it against her cheek. Both of us. The papers? With the marshal. Ashworth's finished. Eli closed his eyes, and she saw something loosen in his face. Something he'd been carrying for 8 years. Good, he said softly. That's good. What happened in the pass? Killed 2 of them, wounded 3 more. The last one ran. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. They weren't expecting much of a fight from one man. That was their mistake. You could have died. Could have. Didn't. He opened his eyes and met her gaze. Had too much to live for. Clara bent and kissed him, tasting salt from her own tears. Don't ever do that again, she whispered. Do what? Save your life? Scare me half to death. Eli chuckled, then winced as the movement pulled at his wounds. I'll try, but I ain't making any promises. The trial of Judge Cornelius Ashworth began 3 days later in the Prescott courthouse. Clara sat in the front row, her hand clasped tightly in Eli's. His wounds were healing well, though he still moved stiffly, and the doctor had warned him against any strenuous activity for at least a month. Eli had responded with the same dry humor Clara had come to love. Reckon sitting in a courtroom watching a snake get what's coming to him don't count as strenuous. The courtroom was packed. 7 families from Silver Creek had made the journey, their faces haggard but determined. Dr. Patterson sat nearby, his weathered hands folded in his lap. Rose had come too, her testimony about Blackwood's tattoo and Ashworth's secret dealings proving crucial to the prosecution's case. And there, in the defendant's chair, sat Ashworth himself. The man who had terrorized Silver Creek for years looked smaller somehow, diminished without his fancy office and his corrupt power. His eyes darted around the room, searching for allies and finding none. Marshal Graves had done his work well. In the days since Clara and Eli had arrived in Prescott, a dozen more witnesses had come forward. Ranchers, miners, shopkeepers, all with stories of extortion, fraud, and intimidation at Ashworth's hands. The prosecution calls Clara May Hollister to the stand. Clara's heart pounded as she rose and made her way to the witness chair. She could feel Ashworth's gaze boring into her, cold and hateful. But she refused to look at him. Instead, she focused on Eli's face, on the pride and love she saw there. Mrs. Hollister, the prosecutor began, can you tell the court how you came to discover the documents that form the core of this case? Clara took a deep breath and told her story. The fall from the roof, Eli's arrival, Ashworth's threats, the night she'd broken into the Silver Dollar and found his hidden records. She spoke for nearly an hour, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. When she described pulling a gun on Blackwood in the alley, a murmur rippled through the courtroom. And what happened after you obtained the documents? The prosecutor asked. We tried to leave town, but Ashworth's men found us. She paused, glancing at Eli. My fiancé stayed behind to hold them off while I got the evidence to safety. Your fiancé being Elijah Tanner, The man seated in the front row? Yes, sir. The same Elijah Tanner whose wife and daughter were murdered 8 years ago by Marcus Blackwood, a man in Judge Ashworth's employ? Yes, sir. The prosecutor turned to face the jury, his voice rising. So we have a corrupt judge who used his position to steal land from hard-working families, a hired killer who murdered women and children, and a widow who risked everything to bring them to justice. He paused dramatically. I think the evidence speaks for itself. The defense attorney tried to paint Clara as a scorned woman, a troublemaker, an outsider who had never been accepted by the good people of Silver Creek. But his arguments fell flat against the mountain of evidence and the parade of witnesses who followed Clara to the stand. When Eli testified about Sarah and Emma, about the 8 years he'd spent hunting for their killer, Clara saw tears on the faces of the jury members. Even the judge, a fair man from Denver brought in specifically because of Ashworth's connections, wiped his eyes. The verdict came on the 5th day. Guilty on all counts. Clara sagged against Eli as the word echoed through the courtroom. Guilty. After everything they'd been through, after all the fear and pain and uncertainty, justice had finally been served. Cornelius Ashworth, the judge intoned, you have been found guilty of fraud, extortion, conspiracy to commit murder, and a host of other crimes too numerous to list. The sentence is life imprisonment without possibility of parole. Ashworth's face went gray. For the first time since the trial began, Clara saw real fear in his eyes. You can't do this, he sputtered as the marshals moved to take him away. I'm a judge. I have connections. I'll have you all destroyed. Your connections can't help you now, Marshal Graves said coldly. Take him away. Clara watched as Ashworth was dragged from the courtroom, still shouting threats that grew fainter with distance. Then she turned to Eli, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she smiled. It's over, she whispered. Not quite. Eli's expression was complicated. There's still Blackwood. Marcus Blackwood's trial was shorter, but no less satisfying. The federal warrant that Dr. Patterson had mentioned proved authentic. Blackwood was wanted for murder in 3 territories, with a list of victims that made Clara's blood run cold. Sarah and Emma Tanner were just 2 names among many. Rose's testimony about the snake and knife tattoo sealed his fate. Marcus Blackwood, the judge pronounced on the final day, you have been found guilty of multiple counts of murder, robbery, and assault. The sentence is death by hanging, to be carried out at dawn tomorrow. Clara expected to feel satisfaction. She expected to feel relief, or vindication, or something like triumph. Instead, she felt hollow. She looked at Eli, expecting to see joy on his face, or at least peace. But his expression was troubled, his dark eyes fixed on Blackwood as the marshals led him away. Are you all right? She asked quietly, as they filed out of the courthouse. Eli didn't answer immediately. They walked in silence to the hotel where they'd been staying, and it wasn't until they were alone in their room that he finally spoke. I thought I'd feel different, he said, staring out the window at the darkening sky. I spent 8 years dreaming about this moment, about watching Blackwood pay for what he did. I thought when it finally happened, the weight would lift, the nightmares would stop, Sarah and Emma would finally be at peace. And I don't feel anything, his voice cracked. They're still dead, Clara. My little girl is still dead. Blackwood hanging won't bring her back. Won't bring any of them back. Clara crossed to him and wrapped her arms around his waist, pressing her cheek against his back. No, she said softly. It won't. Nothing will. But Eli, justice isn't about bringing back the dead. It's about making sure the living can move forward. Eli turned in her arms, his eyes glistening. How do you do that? Find the right words when I can't find any. Practice, she managed a small smile. I've had a lot of grief to work through myself. He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. I don't want to watch him hang tomorrow. Then don't. But I should. After everything he took from me, I should be there at the end. Says who? Clara pulled back to look at him. Eli, you don't owe that man anything. Not your presence, not your attention, not one more second of your life. He's taken enough from you already. The families of his other victims will be there. What will they think if I'm not? They'll think you chose to spend your last morning as a bachelor with a woman you love, instead of watching a monster die. Clara cupped his face in her hands. Sarah would understand. She'd want you to choose life, Eli. She'd want you to be happy. Eli stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, the tension drained from his shoulders. How do you know what Sarah would want? Because I know you. And any woman who earned your love must have been extraordinary. Clara smiled through her own tears. I hope I can live up to her memory. Eli kissed her then, deep and tender and full of a grief that was finally beginning to heal. You don't have to live up to anything, he murmured against her lips. You just have to be you. That's more than enough. They left Prescott the next morning, just as the sun was rising. Behind them, a crowd had gathered at the gallows, waiting for Marcus Blackwood's final walk. But Eli didn't look back. Neither did Clara. The journey home took 4 days. They stopped in Silver Creek only long enough to collect Benny from Martha Simmons, who had cared for him like her own grandchild in their absence. Clara, Eli! Benny's face lit up as they rode into Martha's yard. You came back! You really came back! Told you we would. Clara dismounted and swept him into a fierce hug. Oh, Benny, I missed you so much. I missed you too. Benny's arms tightened around her neck. Is it over? Did you stop the bad men? We stopped them, Eli said, crouching down to Benny's level. Ashworth's going to prison for the rest of his life. And Blackwood, he paused. Blackwood won't hurt anyone ever again. Benny studied Eli's face with those old soul eyes. Are you sad? A little, Eli admitted. But mostly I'm grateful. Grateful that you and Clara are safe. Grateful that I found you both when I did. Grateful that you stopped running? Eli smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. Yeah, son. Grateful that I stopped running. The ride back to the farm felt different than all the other times Clara had made this journey. The road was the same, the mountains and valleys unchanged, but something fundamental had shifted. She was going home, really home, with a family. The Hollister farm looked small and weathered in the winter sunlight, but to Clara it had never seemed more beautiful. The barn Eli had repaired, the fields he had tended, the cabin where they had found each other in the midst of so much darkness. We should fix up the barn proper, Eli said as they dismounted. And the cabin could use another room, for when Benny gets older. Are you planning our future already? Just thinking ahead, he grinned at her. Unless you've changed your mind about marrying me. Not a chance, Elijah Tanner. Good, because I've already talked to Reverend Collins. He says he can marry us next Sunday, if you're willing. Clara's heart soared. Next Sunday? Unless that's too soon. It's not soon enough. She threw her arms around his neck and kissed him soundly. Yes, 1,000 times yes. The week before the wedding passed in a blur of activity. Word of what Clara and Eli had done had spread through Silver Creek like wildfire. The same townspeople who had shunned her, whispered about her, called her cursed. They came to her door one by one with awkward apologies and offers of help. We were wrong, Hank Morrison said, hat in hand, unable to meet her eyes. Wrong about you. Wrong about the boy.
Wrong about everything. Clara could have turned them away, could have held on to her bitterness and told them their help wasn't needed. Instead, she opened her door and welcomed them in. Forgiveness is a choice, she told Eli that night, after the last visitor had left. I can choose to hold on to my anger, or I can choose to let it go. Anger just weighs you down. I'm tired of being weighed down.
You're a better person than I am, Eli said quietly. No, I'm just tired of fighting. Clara leaned her head against his shoulder. We won, Eli. We beat them. Now I want to live in peace. The wedding was held in the small church in Silver Creek on a crisp February morning. Clara wore her mother's wedding dress, the same one she'd worn to marry Samuel all those years ago. Martha Simmons had altered it to fit better, adding new lace to replace what had yellowed with age. You look beautiful, Benny said, his eyes shining as Clara emerged from the back room of the church. Think so? I know so. He reached up to straighten her veil. Pa would be proud of you, Clara. So proud. I hope so, Clara's voice caught. I hope he knows I never stopped loving him, that marrying Eli doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't, Benny agreed. It means you're brave enough to love again. That's the bravest thing anyone can do. When had this boy become so wise? The church was full, not just with townspeople, but with the families who had testified at the trial, who had come back to Silver Creek to rebuild their lives on the land Ashworth had tried to steal. Dr. Patterson sat in the front row next to Martha Simmons, beaming like a proud parent. Even Rose had come, her faded beauty softened by a genuine smile. But Clara only had eyes for Eli. He stood at the altar in a new suit, his dark hair slicked back, his wounded arm still slightly stiff at his side. When he saw her walking down the aisle, his face transformed. You're beautiful, he breathed, as she took her place beside him. You clean up pretty well yourself. Reverend Collins cleared his throat. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Clara May Hollister and Elijah James Tanner in holy matrimony. The ceremony was simple, the vows traditional. But when Eli slipped the ring onto Clara's finger, his hands were trembling. I, Elijah, take thee, Clara, to be my wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death us do part. Clara's eyes overflowed as she spoke her own vows, her voice steady despite the emotion threatening to choke her. I, Clara, take thee, Elijah, to be my wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death us do part. By the power vested in me, Reverend Collins pronounced, I now declare you husband and wife. Eli, you may kiss your bride. The kiss was gentle at first, almost reverent. Then Eli's arms tightened around her, and Clara felt all the love and longing and hope of the past weeks pour into that single moment of connection. The congregation erupted in applause. They walked out of the church as husband and wife, Benny rolling along beside them, his face split with the biggest grin Clara had ever seen. I have a paw again, he whispered as they posed for photographs outside the church. A real paw. Eli knelt down beside the boy's chair, his expression serious. Benny, I want you to know something. I'm not trying to replace your brother. Samuel was your family first, and I'll never ask you to forget him. I know. Benny's eyes were bright. But Eli, I'd be proud to call you Pa, if that's okay. Eli's composure cracked. He pulled Benny into a fierce hug, his shoulders shaking with emotion.
More than okay, he managed. More than okay, son. Clara watched them, her heart so full she thought it might burst. This was what she'd been fighting for. Not just survival, not just justice, but this. Family. Love. Home. The reception was held at the farm, with tables set up outside, and enough food to feed half the county. Music played. Children ran laughing through the fields. And for one perfect afternoon, all the darkness and fear of the past months seemed like a distant memory. As the sun began to set, Clara found herself standing at the edge of the property, looking out at the land that had nearly broken her. "Penny for your thoughts?" She turned to find Eli beside her, 2 glasses of cider in his hands. She accepted one gratefully. "Just thinking about how much has changed," she said. "A few months ago, I was lying in the snow, sure I was going to die. Now look at us." "Pretty good turnaround," Eli agreed. He slipped his arm around her waist, pulling her close. "Any regrets?" "Only that I didn't fall off that roof sooner." Eli laughed, the sound warm and free in a way she'd never heard from him before. "Now that would have been hard to arrange." "Worth it, though." Clara turned in his arms, looking up at his face. "Meeting you was worth everything." Clara Tanner. He tried out the name, smiling. "I like the sound of that." "Clara Tanner," she repeated. "Me too." They stood together in the fading light, watching as the stars began to emerge overhead. Behind them, the sounds of celebration continued, laughter and music, and the happy chatter of people who had been through darkness and emerged into light. "What happens now?" Clara asked. "Now?" Eli pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Now we live. We raise Benny. We work this land. We build something that lasts." "Is that enough for you? After everything you've seen? Everything you've been through?" Eli was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out the locket that held Sarah and Emma's portraits. "For a long time, I kept this close to remind myself what I'd lost, what I was fighting for." He opened the locket, gazed at the tiny faces inside. "But now I think I'll keep it to remind myself what I almost missed, the second chance I nearly threw away." "Eli, Sarah would have liked you," he said softly. "She would have been glad I found you, glad I stopped running long enough to see what was right in front of me." Clara touched the locket gently. "We'll tell our children about them, about Sarah and Emma. They'll know they're part of a bigger story." "Our children?" Eli's eyes lit up. "You want children?" "Someday, if God's willing," Clara smiled. "Though we already have one, don't we?" They both looked toward the cabin, where Benny sat on the porch with Dr. Patterson, listening intently to some story the old man was telling. "Yeah," Eli said, his voice thick. "Yeah, we do." Spring came early that year. The fields that had lain fallow burst into life, green shoots pushing up through the rich soil. The cattle grew fat on new grass. The chickens laid more eggs than Clara knew what to do with, and Benny, who the doctors had said would never walk again, took his first steps with the help of the metal braces Eli had commissioned from a specialist in Denver. "I'm doing it!" he shouted, his face alight with wonder as he lurched across the cabin floor. "Clara, Eli, look! I'm walking!" Clara caught him as his strength gave out, tears streaming down her face. "You're doing it, sweetheart. You're really doing it." "Didn't I tell you?" Eli said, his voice rough with emotion. "Nothing's impossible. Not for a Tanner." Benny looked up at him, this man who had come into their lives as a stranger and become so much more. "I'm a Tanner now?" "You've always been a Tanner," Eli said firmly, "in every way that matters." Summer brought visitors from Prescott. Marshal Graves and his wife, come to see how their star witnesses were faring.
They brought news from the wider world, stories of other corrupt officials being brought to justice, other families reclaiming what had been stolen from them. "You two started something," the marshal said, sipping lemonade on the porch. "Something bigger than you know. Folks all over the territory are standing up, refusing to be pushed around anymore. They saw what you did, and they realized they could do it too." "We just did what needed doing," Clara said modestly. "That's what heroes always say." Marshal Graves raised his glass. "To the Tanners, may your courage never be forgotten." Autumn painted the mountains in gold and crimson, and Clara discovered she was pregnant. "Are you sure?" Eli asked, his face a complicated mix of joy and terror. "The doctor confirmed it this morning. We're going to have a baby, Eli. Our baby." She watched the emotions play across his face, the fear of loss, the weight of old grief, and then, slowly, a dawning wonder that pushed everything else aside. "A baby," he breathed. "Our baby. Are you happy?" Instead of answering, he swept her into his arms and spun her around, laughing and crying at the same time. "Happy doesn't even begin to cover it," he said when he finally set her down. "Clara, you've given me everything. A home, a family, a reason to keep living when I thought I had none left." "You gave yourself that reason," Clara corrected gently. "The day you stopped running and chose to stay, you just needed someone to remind you it was possible." Winter returned, gentler than the year before, and with it came the anniversary of their first meeting. Clara stood on the porch, watching the snow fall softly on the land they had built together. Behind her, she could hear Eli reading to Benny by the fire, the low rumble of his voice punctuated by the boys' laughter. 1 year ago, she had been lying in that snow, broken and alone, praying for help she didn't believe would come. Now she had everything she'd ever wanted, and more than she'd dared to dream. Eli appeared beside her, draping a blanket around her shoulders. "You'll catch cold out here," he murmured, his hand coming to rest on her rounded belly. "I was just thinking," Clara said, "about how much can change in a year." "A lot can change in a single moment," Eli replied. "One decision, one choice to reach out instead of walking away." "Do you ever regret it? Staying?" Eli turned her to face him, his dark eyes soft in the winter light. "Never," he said simply. "Not for 1 second." He kissed her then, slow and sweet, as the snow fell around them, and their son laughed inside their warm cabin, and their unborn child grew strong beneath her heart. Clara had learned many things in her 29 years. She had learned that life was fragile, that love was precious, that even the darkest night eventually gave way to dawn. But the most important lesson, the one she would carry with her for the rest of her days, was this: family wasn't always the one you were born into. Sometimes, family was the stranger who stopped to help when everyone else walked by. Sometimes, family was the choice to stay when running would be easier. Sometimes, family was built from broken pieces, held together by nothing more than stubborn hope and the refusal to give up. She leaned into her husband's embrace and smiled. This was her family. This was her home. And she would fight to protect it for as long as she lived. The snow kept falling, soft and silent, covering the land in a blanket of white. Inside the cabin, a fire crackled warmly. A boy laughed at a story. A man held his wife close and dreamed of the future. And somewhere above the mountains, the stars wheeled on in their eternal dance, bearing witness to one small family's triumph over darkness. Some stories end with happily ever after. This one ended with something better. It ended with hope.